call on their national governments to end trade with Israel. For example, in Ireland, we have what's called the Occupied Territories Bill, which would cease trade, obviously just with the occupied territories, but it would be a significant message sent out that at least Ireland wants to be compliant with international law, and we're encouraging MEPs across Europe to do similar initiatives in their countries.
So Jeremy Corbyn, if you could talk about what sanctions the UK has already imposed on Israel and against whom, and talk about the new inquiry. You've been calling for a new inquiry into Britain's relationship with Israel. If you could tell us what that's about.
Sure. On June the 4th, I'm introducing a private member's bill into the House of Commons calling for an independent inquiry into the whole process of policy making in relation to Gaza, the West Bank, and Britain's arms supplies to Israel, particularly during the period since October 2023. This is similar to the inquiry that was headed by Sir John Chilcot eventually to inquire into policy making surrounding the Iraq War. My purpose in doing this is because the government has obfuscated on many, many occasions over the past 18 months over the level of arms supplies, over trade, over aid, over credits and so on to Israel, and also particularly about the manufacture of Israeli weapons in Britain, particularly in Sheffield and other places where parts for the F-35 are made. So a group of us in Parliament have been raising this consistently. The issue of arms supplies goes something like this. Britain was and remains to some extent a supplier of arms to Israel. David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, suspended 30 arms licenses out of 300 that were in operation without ever specifying what these 30 licenses were. And to be honest, I still don't know what those 30 arms licenses are. He claims they were oversupply of weapons that could be used for crimes against humanity, but we later discovered that many weapons have continued to be supplied, and yesterday we published a report from Progressive International and other groups which is outlining the whole case for suspending arms supplies and pointing out the dishonesty of the British government over the past 18 months on this, and that report is being circulated to MPs and will be part of the case I'll be making to the British Parliament on June the 4th. The question of suspending the trade talks is an interesting one and a very interesting development, because to some extent it is running in tandem and parallel rather with what the European Union is doing, because Britain is no longer a member of the European Union. We welcome that suspension. There has always been the legal case against buying settlement goods because of the illegality of the settlements, but it has been very hard to trace what is settlement goods and what isn't. But actually a consumer boycott is gathering pace. The members of the Cooperative Society, a very big retailer in Britain with a huge membership base across the whole country, voted by 70% last week to request their board to suspend all purchases from Israel, so no Israeli products would be stocked in co-op shops, and there's a lot of pressure on to the other big retailers to do the same. So there's been an enormous shift in public opinion, and it's caused by utter revulsion of seeing emaciated children starve to death or dying on the operating theatre where there's no anaesthetics or even antiseptics to treat their terrible conditions they're suffering. People can stomach no longer the sight of Palestinian children being starved and murdered by the Israeli occupation of Gaza.
MP Corbyn, the UK sanctioned violent West Bank settlers, but the British Foreign Minister Lammy stopped short of targeting Israeli officials. Can you talk about the significance of those sanctions and what you think has to go further?
The sanctions themselves against individual violent settlers are important and a good step forward. So far, the only sanctions apply to Benjamin Netanyahu and Benny Gantz, who have arrest warrants out from the International Criminal Court, and Britain, as a signatory to the Rome Convention, is required to carry out those arrest warrants should either of those individuals turn up in UK territory. What David Lammy stopped short of doing was what many of us requested, which is a wider sanctioning of officials in the Israeli government who've been a party to the decision making on the bombardment of Gaza. Their names are well known, but also of Israeli Defense Force High Command, who are also obviously very much part of the decision making process on which buildings to bomb and which buildings blow up. Not that there's many buildings left in Gaza that are still to be blown up. And so we are continuing that pressure. So there's a big move in Parliament on military equipment, on demanding aid get in rapidly to Gaza, and also sanctions against Israeli officials. And so changes are happening, but it's desperately slow, and already over 60,000 have died in Gaza.
Can I also ask you about your response to what happened in Washington? All these young embassy and consular staffers from different consulates and organizations gathered at the Jewish Museum, and young men opened fire, killing 2 of those who worked at the Israeli embassy. Your response?
It's absolutely shocking. Nobody should be shot. Nobody should be killed at any event anywhere around the world. That is not the way to solve the issue. And so we have to be resolute in demanding peace for all, and also recognize that in the case of Britain and also in the case of the USA, the big demonstrations in support of the Palestinian people are of Christian, Jewish and Muslim and people of no particular faith. And one of the biggest groups on our demonstrations in support of the Palestinian people is actually the Jewish bloc.
I think a lot of what people are not willing to recognize.
Noticias se ponen las pilas justo a hablar ahora de muerte a alguien.
Unless you have a state that is willing to prosecute a war, you're not fighting a war. Or unless you have an organization that can replicate the organs of a state over a territory where it has a monopoly of violence, then you can't do wars. A lot of people have a very childish understanding of resistance, of conflict, of violence. And that is a major impediment to organizing the left. What I just said is very basic shit, and yet, if I talk to 1 million leftists in America, very few of them would even know what the fuck I'm talking about. Or they would disagree, which would be very funny because there's nothing to disagree with. I got approved for a home loan. I know we were talking about serious stuff, but I wanted to shout out because I'm excited. Congratulations, buddy. Weird timing, though. Weird timing because, like, April home sales dropped to the slowest pace in that month since 2009. Oh, no. Home sales in April fell as consumers faced high home prices, growing concern over the economy and employment. I hope you underbid. I hope you underbid ask. Would a home loan to buy bonds be a good idea? Unlikely that you're going to get a loan that's going to be less than the treasury rate. You see what I mean? Like, you're going to borrow against your house at 7% and buy bonds at 5%? I mean, that's what your bank does. The bank borrows money and pays 3%, and then it loads it to you at 7%. That's called being a bank. That's what a bank does. Do you see Corbyn mentioning the new party? Oh, yeah? What? Jeremy Corbyn has said, I hear the call for a new political party. I fully understand that, and that political party needs to be well informed and effective. By next year's local elections, we're going to have something in place. I hope this is real.
Jeremy Corbyn suggests a new party will be in place before 2026 elections.
I don't know why, but the idea of programming a computer to sound British is fucking hilarious. Oi, bro.
Speaking at a recent event, former Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn addressed the call for a new political party, saying, "This whole cause is coming together so that by next year's local elections,
This whole cause.
long before that I hope, we're going to have something in place that is very clear and everyone will want to be part of and support." Corbyn has previously spoken about how he's been supporting efforts to build the resistance via community empowerment. His most recent comments came at an event in Huddersfield, West Yorkshire. The hosts, the People's Alliance for Change and Equality, PACE, plan to connect campaigners, trade unionists, and politicians across the metropolitan borough of Kirklees that oppose war, cuts, and racism. PACE officially launched on the 10th of May, and with local voters able to elect councillors in all the borough's seats in 2026, PACE seeks to put forward candidates to challenge establishment parties. Jeremy Corbyn, I hear the call for a new party. Jeremy Corbyn was among other high-profile speakers from the left, including Jamie Driscoll, Claudia Webb, and Salma Yaqub. At the PACE event, Corbyn said, "I hear the call for a new political party. I fully understand that, and that political party needs to be well-informed and effective. One that gives out a central message of peace, of justice, of equality, of diversity within our society." Mike Foster is an anti-cuts campaigner at the heart of PACE, and in his own speech, he insisted, "Jeremy is clearly pointing in the right direction." With Labour widely discredited as a party of austerity, and with the danger of Nigel Farage and Reform's rise, it is clearer than ever that a left-wing political alternative is needed. One which can say that it's not migrants or trans people selling off our NHS and cutting disability benefits. It's the super-rich. We need to launch this alternative now. It's coming. People, watch this space and get involved. From Newcastle to Southport and Enfield to Kirklees, people are uniting to build movements in their communities that will feed into a national party that can take on the Labour, Reform and Tory wings of the establishment. Assemblies are popping up across the country to put local people at the heart of the resistance. And trade unionists are also ready to step in and play a role.
I think for me, this is exactly what we need. And Jeremy Corbyn once again showing he's just better than Bernie. He's a better version of Bernie, 100%. If he actually does it, he'll once again, hopefully he learned his lesson. Hopefully he learned his lesson about centrist scum and never trusting them. Fucking cinema.
Lynn Boylan, finally, before we end, if you could also respond to events here, Washington, D.C., the killing of these two Israeli embassy staffers, and then the fact that within the EU, it's France that's leading efforts for the official recognition of Palestine. If you could talk about the significance of that, France meeting Saudi Arabia next month, apparently in New York. Foreign Secretary Lamy has said he's also in talks with France and Saudi Arabia about officially recognizing Palestine. Please.
Yeah, and just to echo, I think what Jeremy has said, and send my condolences to the family of the two who were shot dead last night. Nobody should be losing their lives. What we want to see is peace. We want to have a long-standing peace in Gaza, in Palestine, for the Palestinian people and Jewish people to be able to live in peace. In regards to President Macron and leading the case for the recognition of the state of Palestine, Look, it is very welcome. Ireland and Spain recognised Palestine. I think it was about a year ago. Sweden some years before. It is important. It's a really significant step, and I'm sure it'll be very much welcomed by the Palestinian people. But for me, the urgency within the EU now is ending the blockade, is demanding the ceasefire. And demanding the ceasefire means that EU countries need to stop supplying weapons to Israel. So while Jeremy was talking about Britain's role in arming Israel, we have countries within the EU who are significant weapons providers to the Israeli state. If they wanted this conflict and this war and genocide to end tomorrow, then they need to stop supplying weapons to Israel. And the F-35s is a critical part of that. We also need to see the aid getting in, and the aid needs to be delivered and supported through UNRWA. And we're fighting very hard back at any push to militarize the aid agenda. And we're seeing Israel talking about setting up compounds where, women would have to go to areas, putting themselves in vulnerable positions, people with disabilities, children having to go, and that Israel would decide who is deserving and who isn't deserving of aid. This cannot be tolerated. What we need is UNRWA to be allowed to do their job, lift the blockade, let the trucks in and deliver the aid to the people who so desperately need it. Those children, 14,000 children who are at risk of dying from starvation in the next 48 hours. That's where our focus should be. Absolutely recognise the state of Palestine. But right now, the people of Palestine need food, they need medicine, they need water, and they need to
Mike,
stop.
can you explain who Corbyn is? Corbyn is the former leader of the Labour Party, which is the centre-left party in the UK. And he was he ran 2 general elections, one where he massively overperformed expectations and barely lost, and a second where he lost to the Conservatives. He was sabotaged tremendously by the right-wing members of the Labour Party, and then he was pushed out of the party, and they accused him of being anti-Semitic because he stood up to Israel, basically. It was a Zionist op. He ran as an independent last election cycle and won an overwhelming victory against the Labour Party candidates who were inserted into his district to try to win, and they got their asses clapped. So he is now... The Labour just won a really wide margin victory in the last general election to take power because the Conservative movement in the UK split between a new radical far-right party called the Reform Party, and they have their traditional centre-right party called the Conservative Party. And so the Reform party split the vote, the right-wing vote, and so Labour was able to win a lot of seats with like 31% of the vote, or 34% of the vote, or even less sometimes. So there's this huge like Labour majority in the legislature, even though the number of people who voted for them actually went down from when Corbyn ran. So Labour has this incredibly wide but very shallow majority. And now the Labour right wing has come in and implemented austerity, ruining the British government, and kind of kowtowed to right-wing narratives on immigration. Basically pulling what if Kamala Harris had won test? And basically the Labour Party's support has never been lower. His popularity has cratered to almost zero. The Labour Party is in shambles, and the far right has expanded massively in popularity. So you get to see what would have happened had the centrist Democrats won, and the result is that the far right in the UK is overwhelmingly popular. And so now people are calling on Jeremy Corbyn to start a new leftist party free from the sabotage and interference of trying to form a coalitional party with the right-wing centrist neoliberals and their Zionist, supporters. I don't really see this working, guys. This is posted an hour ago and it has 100 likes. This shit is just not catching on. But we'll see.
headlines dropping on them.
Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.
We have a similar issue with our union, and some board members are considering starting their own union. Do you have advice? I usually find splitting union to be a pretty bad bet. All right, I want to cover some other news real quick. The Republicans just passed with one vote their budget bill. And this has been Wall Street's response.
On this vote, the yeas are 215, the nays are 214, with one answering present. The bill is passed.
3 Democrats currently died in office, including Jerry Connolly.
It's been a really remarkable 24 hours on Capitol Hill, especially for House Speaker Mike Johnson, who had set this incredibly ambitious deadline of getting this bill out of the House of Representatives by Memorial Day weekend. Now, so many of his members even were skeptical that this was going to be possible. Yesterday morning, you had members of the House Freedom Caucus saying that they needed another 7 to 10 days to negotiate in order to pass this bill, arguing that this deadline was really arbitrary, that the Speaker was trying to speed this up too quickly, and yet the Speaker was able to just get this finished. The Speaker still on the floor, receiving high fives, hugs, people trying to get photographs with him as they are celebrating this victory. Republicans winning this vote 215 to 214. There were still 2 Republican holdouts, Thomas Massey and Warren Davidson, who voted against this bill because of concerns that it is adding too much to the country's deficit. But still, this is a huge victory where Speaker Johnson was able to bring some of the moderates together, some of those swing district New York Republicans together, and members of the House Freedom Caucus. And he did this in a couple of different ways. One, he gave the House Freedom Caucus what they wanted, which was expediting how quickly work requirements for Medicaid went into effect. He also moved up the deadline for how quickly some of the energy tax credits expired from the period where Joe Biden had passed his own reconciliation bill. And then, of course, for some of those New York moderates, there was an increase in how much people in their districts can deduct in state and local tax. Republicans had to make a very difficult decision. Were they going to vote against Donald Trump's agenda or not? I just spoke with one of the conservatives who had been a holdout over the weekend, and they told me Donald Trump did make a big difference here. His legislative team made a big difference here. But ultimately, Speaker Mike Johnson, who so many of his colleagues say is an extremely patient, thoughtful, slow-moving, even when things start to feel like they're building, he doesn't lose his temper. They said that that was really key to this. Democrats.
What is this collaboration as fucking propaganda? No wonder I know what the fuck is this shit? That was dog shit.
Let's turn now to former Treasury official and Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Rattner. He's got charts on the potential impact of this huge legislation. Steve, good morning. So let's talk about the deficit and what this House bill, if it does make its way through, if the Senate, which has said it's not going to vote, many Republicans for this, it's just too big, but if it does go through, what would it do to the deficit?
Yeah, as you can imagine, given what Ali just went through, all the list of things that they're doing, the impact on the deficit is pretty significant. Let's just put some numbers on some of the cuts first. The extension of the personal income tax reductions that were made during the 2017 bill and are set to expire at the end of this year, $2.2 trillion over 10 years. Raising the standard deduction, $1.3 trillion. The child tax credit, $800 billion. And then you get into Trump's campaign promises, no tax on overtime, car loans, interest, and tips, $200 billion.
Chat, all subscriptions are now tips. All subscriptions are now tips. I need to contact Twitch and be like, how do we get this stuff characterized as a tip? How do we get this characterized as a tip? How do I get this no longer characterized as a royalty or whatever the fuck they characterize it as? And change it to a tip. Dodos are tips for sure, definitely. I believe it's capped at 25K. That's it! Slime B, thank you for the 5 tier ones. Come on! Come on! 25K, that's shit! I ain't shit! Come on!
Increasing defense spending. This is his attempt to take Social Security taxes away from students that are not paying by giving them a special deduction. And then you get into the cuts, the student loan changes, the climate fund, and Medicaid.
No gira 360 grados, quiere probar eso. Nada más.
to Medicaid that Senate Republicans are going to be extremely concerned about. You also have the whole issue of the state and local tax deduction. I know you did such a good job explaining it yesterday, but of course this was a provision negotiated at the last minute by Republicans in purple or blue districts in New York, in California, in Pennsylvania, and Illinois, in states with very high property taxes that they're able to deduct from their federal taxes. Republicans negotiating a $40,000 cap. Nobody in the Senate has an appetite for that, especially when it drives the deficit. So you're going to see some changes made on all of those things. And to get this across the finish line by July 4th will certainly be a hurdle for them.
Congressman Dent, are you surprised the party pulled this off on the House side? Concerned it may pass without members even reading what's in it?
I'm not at all surprised that the bill passed, that Trump helped muscle it through to get some of these recalcitrant members on the hard right who were going to melt when Trump got involved. We all knew that. The real question is, how many members walk the plank unnecessarily? Because the Senate will make major changes to this bill. There's no question about it. The Senate never wanted to do one big, beautiful bill. They could still break this thing up. They are going to do less in terms of Medicaid cuts. They're going to do less in terms of SNAP cuts. That's the food assistance programs. They're going to obviously be more protective of the renewable energy credits. And they will also pare down the expansion of the SALT deduction. And probably on student lending, they probably won't go as far as the House. The Senate has a lower threshold for pain than the House. You have to remember that. And so I think this is going to be a dramatically different bill. Those folks on the hard right who were upset with this bill in the House, they're going to really be upset when the Senate gets through with this thing. So right now it's in the Senate's court, and expect a more measured product coming out of there.
So Congressman Crowley, if you were in Democratic leadership, what would you be telling your members right now after it looks like Trump and Johnson just sort of steamroll the chamber with this bill? Where does the party go from here?
Well, first of all, every Republican owns this bill now. When it only passes by one vote, that means that every person who voted for the bill owns the bill. So, and I think Charlie's 100% right, as is Julie, when it goes to the Senate. And by the way, when Julie said it was that's the $1 million question, it's actually the $4 trillion question. What will the Senate do? I think Charlie's right. They will pare it down. It will go to conference. I would tell my members that. And they're going to have to vote on this again, except this time, when it comes back to the Senate, some of those moderates may not like this bill when it comes back. Some of the budget hawks may not like it as well. So this is a long ways to go. But I think the message is that they're cutting 14 million people off of Medicaid, that they are adding trillions of dollars to our nation's debt, and it's not being paid for. So there's a lot here that voting no, you can relax on.
Although what I think is a big takeaway is what Trump says goes if you're a Republican. Julie, give us more of a Trump's role getting Republicans to fall in line and what it could mean is, as it's working its way through the Senate, which we just discussed, might be a little more prickly to some of what's in this bill.
Speaker Mike Johnson and the entire Republican leadership made absolutely no secret in touting the crucial role that the president played in getting his members to fall in line. I want to read you a little statement that the White House released before the vote, saying President Trump is committed to keeping his promises, and failure to pass this bill would be the ultimate betrayal. We know that in a closed-door meeting on Capitol Hill on Tuesday, he called out members by name. He threw the F-bomb around. I mean, this is a president who, of course, is a populist. It's not so much the deficit that concerns him or Medicaid or all these other provisions. It's getting his legislation and funding his campaign promises, which include mass deportations, his tax cuts, the signature.
This is a good example of why a public option is a bad idea and why Medicare for All, banning private insurance, is the only way. Because you have to demolish the insurance industry and raise it to the ground. That's the only way you create a political constituency strong enough to resist right-wing repeal efforts. Furthermore, if you did something like Medicare for All, it would be so fucking popular that you would win for generations. That's what happened with when we had the most social democratic period of our history. We call it the New Deal. It was a New Deal hyper majority. It realigned politics. It made the Republican Party largely irrelevant except for presidential elections.
Proposal he had in 2017, which cost a money, and the Senate knows that. They want to make that permanent. They want to keep no tax on tips and overtime in the bill. But as you heard from the congressman, this is going to be a
There was also a Senate bill passed to block California from banning gas-only vehicles. California has a law that wants to ban internal combustion engines by 2035. And they're trying to prevent California from having states' rights.
wildly different product if and when it passes the Senate, and we already are hearing from John Thune, from other Republicans who say there's just no way they're going to make that July 4th deadline on it.
Again, this is a massive bill. Everyone's still working their way through it. Congressman Crowley, Politico, is reporting that even more people than initially projected, which was around 8 million people, could lose Medicaid coverage based on some of these last-minute changes in the bill. And we know the Congressional Budget Office has very specifically said that the country's lowest earners will take a financial hit from this bill. Politically, if Democrats can't turn that around on the GOP in the midterms, then what does that mean?
Yeah, no, that's what I mentioned. I think that especially when many of these Republicans, the moderate Republicans, said they would not vote for a bill that would cut Medicaid, and now they've just voted for a bill that will cut Medicaid. So I do think that there's an awful lot of meat in here for Democrats to exploit, to use politically. But I think more importantly, it really demonstrates the agenda of the Republicans and what their priorities are. And that is to provide a tax break to the wealthiest among us who don't need a tax break, and take that out of the mouths of children, the poorest in our country, from food stamps to Medicaid. It's only increasing poverty, not decreasing poverty in our country.
Congressman Dent, as we continue to pour through the text, we can look at some of the broader projections. This bill would add trillions of dollars to the deficit. 2.3 trillion is on the low end projection, 3.8 trillion on the high end, and that's based on a lot of analysis from several nonpartisan entities and experts. How do you suppose deficit hawks in the GOP defend that? We know there are some who aren't defending it, but they still got it across the finish line. The House Freedom Caucus got on board.
Well, they're going to have a hard time defending it from a deficit standpoint. But what the Senate's likely to do, they're going to call the tax cuts as they are current policy. That will make the deficit number look better. If they call it current law, then the deficit number would look much worse. So watch that happen. And remember, this whole process is being driven by extending the 2017 tax cuts. That's what the Senate's interested in. That's what Trump is interested in. I don't think the Senate and Trump really want to do a whole lot for Medicaid. I don't think they want to do a whole lot on the spending side, to be perfectly candid. And I suspect the fiscal hawks in the House will be very disappointed with what comes out of the Senate, because they are not going to go, they just are not going to go as far as the House on Medicaid, which is a vulnerability for Republicans with these loss of coverages that are projected by CBO and others.
Julie,
they may not go low on salt and state and local taxes as well.
Okay, so those are two things we'll be watching as this bill continues to work its way through. Now the upper chamber, before it comes back to the House, before it can land on the president's desk.
If these tax cuts, if this passes, it would steamroll the decline of the U.S. Well, that's what we're living in. We're living in, this is why it's so funny. Like, normally I would be furious, but at this point it's just funny. I mean, China is out with a 3-nanometer chip the same day that we're like cutting support for student loans, we're attacking healthcare, we are cutting taxes on the hyper-rich, we're undermining the clean transition. Like, I'm sorry, but this country's just, they're in such an ideological feud that they can't see what's in front of them. And like, I feel like the United States of America is collapsing. The spending on the military shit doesn't mean the government is going to remain strong. It's collapsing. It's hollowing itself out. It's like going on an all-sugar diet. Like, how long can you sustain yourself on an all-sugar diet? Like, maybe you could do it for a day or two, but after that, like, what would, you know what I mean? Diabetic shock? teeth rotting. Hey, like you just gonna pass out.
Don't get too comfortable. Better not get too comfortable. Bitch, don't get too comfortable. Bitch, don't get too comfortable. Better not get too comfortable.
President Trump says tariffs on China won't be as high as 145%. Will come down substantially. It won't be zero. Like, one of my favorite things is people going like,
There's no manufacturing jobs anymore. Their people are just delusional. There's no manufacturing.
there are 120 million manufacturing jobs in China.
There are no manufacturing jobs.
The America at the absolute peak had 18 million manufacturing jobs. At our absolute peak, we had 18 million. I think we have around 11 million now.
There's no manufacturing jobs.
It's like one of those things that like people I normally think are pretty intelligent will say. And it's like, you haven't looked into it at all, have you? You haven't looked at all. Actually, I think there was something on The Daily Show recently where they talk about it. It was kind of funny. I saw a clip of it and I was laughing. Oh. It was Big Eve. Okay, this is the one. This is what I wanted.
A book called Apple in China, the capture of the world's coming. I've got to tell you something. You know, I'm not much of a reader. I was going to wait for the movie to come out. But honestly, like, this is jaw-dropping. Yeah. This book is jaw-dropping and so well researched. It's not a polemic. It's not hyperbole. It's the story.
What coupon rate at a treasury auction will you have to see to force a policy U-turn? What we would need to see is recession plus high interest rates. I think we're teetering on recession, and the interest rates are slowly spiking. But, like, as I said earlier in the stream, the housing market is stalled. April is usually a month where people buy houses. April, May, June. Those are like peak buying months for the market. And it's usually pretty strong through the summer. And then as we get closer to fall, that's when the housing market tends to slow down. So if this is the worst April since 2009, it's a fucking bad sign. I know someone who's trying to sell a house at a prime location and no one's buying. And the thing about housing is the one part of the economy that you can't outsource. Like, somebody has to be here to fill in the paperwork. Somebody's got to be here to assemble the building or do the remodeling or whatever. It's a massive amount of job. So if the housing market slows down, it hits everything.
Story of how China basically was built as a country by Apple. Is that?
Yeah, that's like I say, that sometimes it sounds really unhinged, and I get that.
Yes.
Right? And yet, like, what happened is, like, I came across internal documents after speaking with 200 people. I would say that
No puedo comer.
you're overplaying the importance of one company, but I will say this. What is going to make what makes China better than the U.S. already? It's already over. I want you guys to know this. Everybody is just catching up to reality. China is the most powerful economy in the world. It is the most powerful country in the world. The only place it's not is control of the finance industry and the military.
salted caramel Butterfinger bar and for a chance to win a game with Butterfinger.com.
No sigo para terminar.
I'm doing good. I'm just prepping for the
Filipino. ¿Cómo te dejo ya ir?
Are you? Oh, I was also, I have to
No, no, chao, 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 chao. Chao, chao. Chao, Dios mío.
to cos like for cosplay and anime and I can't English right now, but I have to write at Michelle Lopsy on the back.
A year into China. So this is mostly like they spend loads of money, billions of dollars on machinery that they put on Apple, on production lines that are sort of orchestrated by Apple but not owned by them.
Building the machinery,
Yeah.
but they're outsourcing that. They're hiring companies to build.
Like outsourcing is the word, and yet there's something so
They own the means of production with it.
they own. So I compare it to like the way Uber is the largest taxi provider in the world without owning any cars. It's the same thing for manufacturing. So none of the factories are owned by Apple, and yet they have like maniacal control over the machinery within those factories.
Right.
And so and then they're doing like I heard someone saying we treat the workers like our arms and legs, like you do this and you do that. And the number of people they've trained like that is 28 million, so larger than the labor force of California since 2008. And the number of billions of dollars they spend on machinery is, $14 billion, I think, is the peak year. So some of that's public, and other this material
So
is
these
not public.
documents, the numbers seem fantastic.
Of course. And they do and they don't, right? So 55 billion is
A year.
55 billion is per year. That's the investment. A lot of that is training costs for the employees in China. And the number of employees, like per Tim Cook's public estimate, right, is 3 million people are assembling iPhones and other Mac products in China.
But these aren't just low level, like, it's a million people
it's
doing
both. Lots of unskilled jobs, the ones that Howard Lutnick wants to bring back to America.
Yes.
Yeah. And lots of PhDs at Foxconn. Really sophisticated.
Right.
Does China have enough alternative markets to turn to, though, if the U.S. economy collapsed? Yeah, damn. Is there like 1.4 billion people in like a rapidly developing country with like a lot of savings that might be able to increase their consumption?
My point is, like, lots of times people think there's great vocational training in China.
The funniest thing in the world is to be like, but you need us to consume your products. You need us. You need us to eat burger. You need us to eat burger. You need us to eat burger. No one else can eat the burger. You need us to eat the burger. You're delusional. You're fucking delusional. Instead of them like, I don't know, for example, digging the rare earth metals out of the ground, refining it, building it into a fucking super high-tech phone, and then putting it on a container ship and shipping it across the country to some fucking welfare parasite HR rep. I mean corporate welfare parasite HR rep in America could buy it. How about the Chinese people who make it buy it? That's how America built itself up. You raised the wages and the Ford workers bought the Fords. That's our whole fucking story. You think you need us. You need us to eat the burger. They don't need shit. They have the valuable thing. You're the idiot who needs it. What but I've got dollars. I just printed them out of my LaserJet printer. Don't you want these incredibly amazing dollars? Do you see the bond market? Do you see the bond market and the interest rates of the treasury spiking? The whole system is falling apart. American dominance is ending in front of your eyes. I want you to look at this today. Now, look at this. Interest rates going up. In front of you, over 5% interest on a treasury bond. On a treasury bond. My parents' mortgage is 2.75%. My parents' mortgage is
The federal government has to pay a higher interest rate than my fucking parents do. And it's only getting worse. It's getting worse.
The vocational school in China is Apple.
They've trained all these workers.
Yes, they've done a huge job. So let me just put the 55 billion in context.
Please.
I could not find any corporate equivalent for how much someone is investing in another country. So I had to go to government efforts. So you look at something like the CHIPS Act, right? Biden's flagship plan, let's bring chip fabrication back to America. That's 53 billion over 4 years, right? Another way of saying that Apple is investing quadruple what the Commerce Secretary called a once-in-a-generation investment in America. So that's nuts. And then you go back to the Marshall Plan, and you're thinking, okay, so maybe it's like half of the Marshall Plan, something like that. Like, that's going to be crazy. People are going to relate to that. So I take the Marshall Plan spending from 1948 to 1952, right? This is sort of like America saving Europe after the World War II. And you convert it to 2015 dollars, and it's half the annual spending of what Apple's investing in China.
This is $130 billion in 16 countries.
16 countries versus one.
Versus one country.
Yeah, and it's not one, right? It's like the modern equivalent of the Soviet Union. Like, it's our biggest adversary. And so, I sort of end the book, not to sort of like get so ahead of myself here.
No spoilers.
Yeah.
Oh my God, does Apple die?
Paperback version?
I don't want to tell people.
So I say that as China, as their GDP eventually overtakes America, and especially because they're doing so good in the advanced electronics sector, more people are going to ask, how did they do it? Like, how did they go from such poverty 50 years ago into the world's greatest maker of like military weaponry and advanced electronics? And a big portion of the disquieting answer is year in, year out, Apple taught them.
They do this, by the way, this is China, and this is not to single out. This was a decision that...
I'm confused how the government has to pay more based on the bond rate. Because the government buys bonds at auction. And this is the secondary market of those bonds bought at auction. So you can buy bonds from the secondary market, or you can buy bonds directly from the government. If you buy bonds directly from the government, the rate at which people are willing to pay is based on where the market is right now. So the government, on its freshly issued bonds, will have to generate a higher and higher rate in order to sell the bond. So they're interrelated. So this is the secondary market, but the government is constantly issuing new bonds. And the reason why there was a large spike yesterday is because the Treasury auction went poorly. Let me see if I can find a story on it to explain it. Here we go. Epic demand for U.S. Treasury auctions shows investor jitters about tax bill deficit. U.S. Treasury Department announced soft demand for a $16 billion sale of 20-year bonds on Wednesday, with investors worried about the country's increasing debt burden as Congress wrangles with a tax and spending bill that is expected to worsen the fiscal outlook. The poorly received auction, which saw stocks of the dollar sell off while U.S. Treasury yields rose, shows intensified investor worries about the country's ballooning debt.
It was, yes, well, began with shareholder capitalism, I guess, in the 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, not
Vienna, 2/3 of its citizens live in subsidised social housing, but in the UK, less than 1 in 10 live in a council house. And yet, quality and style is simply out of this world.
Is this what you think of when you think of council housing?
This is Alt-Erna, a social housing estate on the outskirts of Vienna. It may look like tough, brutalist architecture, but actually it's humane, caring design of the highest order. nurseries, schools and tennis courts all conveniently on site. I can't quite believe this. This is about long-term thinking, allowing people to put down roots, giving them stability. And just imagine if I proposed a high-density council housing estate with loads of swimming pools, indoor and outdoor, clubs, play spaces. I'd be left out of town because everybody would see you can do that. With 10,000 residents, Alto has the highest density living in Vienna. And you never guessed it from the start. Hi, so nice to see you. Monaco is the equivalent of 6 like a hollow, tower accommodation can give you a quarter of the size for almost the same rent. And with the Viennese having such secure tenancies, there's little temptation to buy. There's little temptation to buy. So Monaco has no stress of being moved on. Which is handy, as her dad Heinz lives in the block next door.
How long have you lived there? Oh, 40 years. 40 years? 40 years.
Yeah. People are like, Mike, how many? I've probably shown that, I want to say, 20 times on this stream at least. And the reason why is because I want these ideas to get out there. Housing does not cost a lot because of the structure or the labor. It is real estate speculation. It is not because it's that expensive to build a fucking building. I don't know if this is a dumb question, but I understand why other countries buy U.S. bonds and other dollars for their country, but why does who does the U.S. government buy from? The U.S. government buys goods and services with our budget. Housing needs to be treated as a human right and not a commodity, and until then, we'll never have truly affordable housing. That's what they do in Vienna. What are your thoughts on those type of projects only possible in mono-ethnic, monoculture society? That is such a good question. In 2022, New York City had approximately 3.1 million immigrants, representing 38% of the city's total population. Vienna, Austria, had, at the beginning of 2024, had 35.4% of its residents who were foreign nationals and 40.2% born abroad. About 45.4% of Vienna's population is of foreign origin, either foreign citizens or Austrian nationals born abroad. I guess it isn't just whites then.
Well, no, that's very much yeah, absolutely. Right, I mean, it's that ethos of do what's best for us.
Communities that I talk about the most are called Alt-Urla. I think it's like Alt-Urla Vienna. I might be misspelling it. I just love that people get such cool, like, planters. Like, the planters are so deep that you can, like, plant fucking, like, large bushes or small trees. It's so fucking cool.
So you're searching out the cheapest labor, the lowest price. But it really, it seemed like Xi Jinping in, was it 2013, is what made this so fraught. Would that be correct to say?
Well, yes, because I would say, so my thesis is really that they sleepwalked into this crisis. I mean, you cannot blame Apple for moving into China in the early 2000s. For starters, the American consensus for that was that we're going to inculcate the next great democracy.
WTO, they came in.
I mean, there was broad political support to do that. The problem was when Xi Jinping...
among the neoliberal establishment. Organized labor was against it.
And really turns China in an authoritarian and belligerent direction.
Right.
Nonsense. That's incredible.
It's not like Apple was on the sidelines not noticing. They were attacked within 36 hours of Xi ascending to the presidency.
Tell them about Consumer Day.
Consumer Day is something that happens March 15th every year in China, and basically goes back to 1991.
Oh, y falta la...
China Consumer Day. Yeah, I have read this.
Beware the eyes of Consumer Day.
Ahora falta el
So
mío.
companies are called out for not living up to the socialist ethos, okay? And it's increasingly Western companies in the mid-2000s. And in McDonald's is 2012, and the book opens with 2013.
Olvidado.
Attack for Consumer Day. And it's for warranty differences of all things. So
It turns out to be not actually.
Okay, so if you don't know what it is, basically the Chinese government finds companies that are mistreating their customers by giving them substandard products or breaking promises or anything like that, and calls them out and shames them in front of the country. Like if you have like substandard products or you're hurting people, they call them out. They call out companies and they bring their leadership in front of the country. And then the companies have to have these massive improvement plans